If you are watching this right now, you need to pay very close attention because what I'm about to share with you could directly impact your benefits, your taxes, and your peace of mind in ways that you might not have anticipated even just a few weeks ago. There are major developments happening right now in Washington and across the country that every single American, especially those of you who are retired or approaching retirement, absolutely needs to understand before it is too late to take action. We have a lot of ground to cover today, so I want you to stay with me until the very end of this video because each piece of news connects to the next, and together they paint a picture of significant changes that are coming to how our government operates and how it interacts with everyday citizens like you and me. Let us start with something that has a lot of people very concerned right now, and that is a recent appeals court decision that legal experts are calling one of the most troubling rulings we have seen in quite some time. This decision came down just recently, and the implications are far-reaching for millions of Americans who depend on federal programs and benefits. The appeals court ruling in question deals with the fundamental question of how much authority federal agencies have to interpret and enforce their own regulations. Now, I know that might sound like dry legal talk, but let me explain why this matters to you in very practical terms. When you apply for Social Security benefits, when you file a claim with Medicare, when you interact with any federal agency that provides services or benefits to American citizens, those agencies operate under certain rules and guidelines. For decades, courts have generally given these agencies what is called deference, meaning that if an agency interprets a regulation in a certain way, courts would typically accept that interpretation as long as it was reasonable. This was important because it allowed agencies like the Social Security Administration to develop consistent policies that people could rely on. What this recent appeals court decision has done is significantly narrow that deference. The court ruled that agencies cannot simply interpret regulations in whatever way they see fit and expect courts to go along with it. On the surface, this might sound like a good thing because it means more oversight of government agencies, but here is where it gets complicated and why many advocates for seniors and benefit recipients are deeply worried. When agencies lose the ability to interpret their own rules, it creates uncertainty. It means that policies you have been counting on could be challenged in court and potentially overturned. It means that the process of getting benefits approved could become slower and more complicated as agencies become more cautious about how they make decisions. And perhaps most concerning, it opens the door for more litigation that could ultimately result in cuts or restrictions to programs that millions of Americans depend on. Legal analysts are already predicting that this decision will be used as a basis for challenging various federal benefit programs. We could see lawsuits targeting specific provisions of Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security disability determinations, and other programs. Each of these lawsuits will create uncertainty, and in some cases, they could result in real changes to how benefits are calculated and distributed. What should you do right now if you are concerned about this? First, make sure all of your benefit applications and paperwork are completely up to date and accurate. If you have any pending claims or appeals, document everything meticulously. Second, stay informed about any changes to the specific programs you rely on. And third, consider reaching out to your representatives in Congress to express your concerns about maintaining the stability of federal benefit programs. Now let us move on to our second major story, and this one is causing a tremendous amount of anxiety among certain communities across the country. I am talking about the expanding data sharing arrangement between the Internal Revenue Service and other federal agencies, particularly those involved in immigration enforcement. For as long as most of us can remember, there has been a strong firewall between the IRS and other government agencies. This firewall existed for a very good reason. The government wanted to make sure that everyone, regardless of their immigration status, would feel safe filing their taxes and paying what they owe. This is not just about fairness, it is about practical tax collection. When people are afraid to interact with the IRS, they do not file taxes, and that means lost revenue for programs and services that benefit all Americans. What we are now seeing is a significant erosion of that firewall. New data sharing agreements have been put in place that allow immigration enforcement agencies to access certain IRS records in ways that were not possible before. The specifics of what information is being shared and under what circumstances are still being clarified, but what we know so far has many people deeply concerned. Here is what this means in practical terms. If you are a mixed status family, meaning some members of your household are citizens or legal residents while others may have uncertain immigration status, you need to be very careful and very thoughtful about how you approach your taxes going forward. This does not mean you should not file your taxes. In fact, not filing could create even bigger problems, but it does mean you should probably consult with a qualified tax professional or immigration attorney before making any decisions. For those of you who are citizens with no immigration concerns whatsoever, you might be wondering why this matters to you. Well, it matters because these kinds of data sharing arrangements have a way of expanding over time. What starts as a targeted program for one specific purpose can gradually grow to include more types of information and more agencies. We have seen this pattern before with other government surveillance and data collection programs. Additionally, the chilling effect of this policy could have economic consequences that affect everyone. When immigrant workers stop filing taxes or participating in the formal economy, it reduces tax revenue and can create distortions in labor markets and other economic systems. These effects ripple out and touch communities across the country, not just immigrant communities. If you have questions about how this policy might affect you or your family, I strongly encourage you to seek professional advice. Do not rely on rumors or social media posts. Get accurate information from qualified professionals who understand both tax law and immigration law. Now, I want to turn to our third major story, which is the hiring of new administrative law judges across several federal agencies. This might not sound like headline news, but trust me when I tell you that it could have a massive impact on your ability to get benefits approved or to win an appeal if your initial claim is denied. Administrative law judges are the people who hear appeals when your Social Security claim is denied, when you have a dispute with Medicare, or when you need to challenge a decision made by various federal agencies. These judges have enormous power to affect individual lives. A good judge who carefully considers the evidence and applies the law fairly can be the difference between you getting the benefits you deserve and being left out in the cold. What we are seeing right now is a significant wave of new judges being hired across multiple agencies. On one hand, this is potentially good news because the backlogs for hearings have been absolutely terrible. Some people have been waiting 2 years or more just to get a hearing date for their Social Security disability appeal. More judges could mean faster processing and shorter wait times. However, there are serious concerns about who is being hired and what criteria are being used to select these new judges. Reports suggest that the hiring process has been expedited in ways that bypass some of the traditional vetting procedures. There are questions about whether political considerations are playing a role in the selection process, and there are worries that the new judges may approach cases with a different philosophy than their predecessors, potentially being more skeptical of claimants and more likely to deny benefits. If you have an appeal pending or if you think you might need to file an appeal in the future, this is something you should be paying very close attention to. The judge who hears your case can make an enormous difference in the outcome. Having quality legal representation, whether through an attorney or a qualified representative, becomes even more important when there is uncertainty about how judges will approach cases. Some advocacy organizations are already tracking the decisions being made by newly hired judges to see if there are patterns emerging. This information could be valuable for people preparing their cases, helping them understand what evidence and arguments are most likely to be persuasive. Now let us discuss our final major story for today, which involves significant reforms being implemented within immigration and customs enforcement. These reforms are changing how the agency operates in communities across America, and regardless of your personal views on immigration, these changes have implications that extend far beyond just immigration enforcement. The reforms being implemented include changes to how and where enforcement actions can take place, modifications to detention policies and practices, and new guidelines for cooperation between federal immigration agents and local law enforcement agencies. Some of these changes are expansions of enforcement authority, while others are restructurings of how existing authority is exercised. One of the most significant changes involves the locations that were previously considered sensitive and generally off-limits for enforcement actions. Schools, hospitals, churches, and similar locations were traditionally places where immigration enforcement was not supposed to happen except in extraordinary circumstances. The new reforms have modified these guidelines, and while the full details are still being implemented, the direction is clear. There are fewer places now that can be considered truly off-limits. Why does this matter to you, even if you are not personally affected by immigration enforcement? It matters because when people are afraid to go to hospitals, we have public health consequences. When parents are afraid to send their children to school, we have educational consequences. When families are afraid to go to church, we have community consequences. These effects touch everyone, not just immigrant families. Additionally, the changes to cooperation between federal and local law enforcement have created a patchwork of different policies across the country. Some local jurisdictions are cooperating fully with the new federal priorities, while others are maintaining their previous policies of limited cooperation. This creates confusion and uncertainty, and it affects community trust in law enforcement in ways that can have lasting consequences for public safety. The reforms also include significant changes to detention facilities and procedures. There are new contracts being signed with private detention companies, expansions of detention capacity in some areas, and changes to the standards and oversight that apply to these facilities. Civil liberties organizations are watching these developments closely and raising concerns about conditions and due process protections. For families who may be affected by these changes, it is more important than ever to have a plan and to know your rights. Everyone in the United States, regardless of immigration status, has certain constitutional rights. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to not open your door unless agents have a warrant signed by a judge. You have the right to an attorney, although in immigration proceedings that right does not mean the government will provide one for free. If you are concerned about these issues, there are organizations and communities across the country that provide Know Your Rights training and legal resources. Taking advantage of these resources is not about doing anything wrong. It is about being informed and prepared. Now, as I bring all of these stories together, I want you to see the bigger picture of what is happening. We are in a period of significant change in how the federal government operates and how it interacts with citizens and residents. Some of these changes are happening through court decisions, some through administrative actions, some through policy reforms. But taken together, they represent a shift that will affect millions of people. If you are someone who depends on federal benefits, whether that is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Veterans Benefits, or any other program, you need to be more engaged and more informed than ever before. Do not assume that the benefits you have been counting on will automatically continue unchanged. Stay informed about policy changes. Keep your records organized and up to date. Consider reaching out to advocacy organizations that work on issues affecting your benefits. If you are someone who may be affected by changes to IRS data sharing or immigration enforcement, seek qualified professional advice. Do not make decisions based on fear or rumors. Understand your rights and your options. Make informed choices about how to protect yourself and your family. And regardless of your personal situation, consider making your voice heard through the democratic process, contact your representatives in Congress, vote in elections, participate in public comment periods when new regulations are being proposed. The people making these decisions need to hear from the people who will be affected by them. I know this has been a lot of information to take in, and some of it is genuinely concerning, but knowledge is power, and by understanding what is happening, you are in a much better position to respond effectively and to protect yourself and the people you care about. Thank you for staying with me through this entire video. If you found this information valuable, please share it with friends and family members who might also benefit from knowing about these developments. The more people who are informed, the better we can all navigate these changing times together. Remember to check back regularly for updates on all of these stories because things are moving fast and new developments could come at any time. Stay informed, stay prepared, and take care of yourselves and each other. Until next time.